This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The UK faces a blockade as its European neighbours try to stop a new strain of COVID-19 from crossing their borders. South African health authorities alarmed by new variant of coronavirus which appears to hit younger people harder. And Nigerian farmers worried about severe food scarcity as food reserves continue to decline. This is Africa Live. A warm welcome to the show. I am Peninah Karibe. Joining me with the business headlines is Rama.
Thank you very much, Peninah. Here's what's coming up in the pipeline. Egypt's economy is forecast to continue on its positive growth trajectory in the next 2 fiscal years. We'll look at the data. And fuel prices in Africa's largest oil producer have risen as costly subsidies are removed. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Peninah.
Thank you, Rama. Tonight, more and more countries are banning British travellers as they try to contain a new and more infectious strain of the coronavirus. More than 30 countries and regions have suspended passenger flights from the United Kingdom. Some countries, such as Saudi Arabia and Ireland, are also halting ferry arrivals. France is cutting all travel links with Britain, including freight deliveries for 48 hours. In Australia, 2 cases of the same new coronavirus strain have been identified in South Wales. They are among 6 new cases in people returning from overseas. Authorities stress that no one with this virus mutation is believed to be circulating in the community. Australia has closed its borders to all non-citizens since March in an effort to curb the spread of the disease. The country says it has no plans to suspend flights with Britain at present. South Africa has also identified a new variant of the coronavirus that is driving a second wave of infections. South African researchers identified the new virus variant after sequencing hundreds of samples and noticing that it had been dominant in those collected over the past 2 months. CGTN's Ulysses Jamela has more details.
The Health Ministry announced that a genomics team sequenced hundreds of samples from across the country since the beginning of the pandemic in March. They then noticed that a particular variant has increasingly dominated the findings of the samples collected. The evidence collated strongly suggested that the current second wave being experienced here in South Africa is being driven by that variant.
This new addition to the family is quite aggressive and quite virulent, and so far it counts for 90% of cases that we have seen. And to make it easier for patients to understand, it moves and spread quite fast. That's why the curve is looking different from the first virus.
Dr. Kutsia says it was expected that the new variant would appear. What was unexpected was how rapidly the variant would become dominant in South Africa. Clinicians have also noted that with this new variant, younger patients with no underlying conditions have been presenting with critical illness.
I normally call it the black sheep because we do not know what this new variant is going to do. What we do know is that it can change itself or mutate, and it's got 3 mutations. The first one, predominantly, in the first wave, we predominantly saw it was elderly people and people with high blood sugar and cholesterol. Now, this black sheep that now comes into play here, or the new variant that comes into play, unfortunately also go for young people. And what we have seen, especially in the ICUs, the people who admitted is not only anymore your elderly patients with non-communicable diseases, but it is young people.
The health fraternity is now extremely concerned.
We are very, very worried. Again, because what we have seen is that the curve goes straight up. It doesn't slowly goes up, it goes straight up. It's a problem. It means the infection is much more virulent. Again, we have, during this time of the year, there's a lack of doctors. Everyone, or most of them, are on leave. So there's skeleton staff.
Government has now issued a stern warning against organizing and attending festivals, sporting events and mass gatherings. These events have been identified as super spreaders of the virus. The importance for people to adhere to the non-pharmaceutical interventions of wearing masks, washing hands and social distancing has been further emphasized. Yodisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Tunisia's government has suspended all air travel with Britain, Australia and South Africa, citing fears of a new coronavirus strain. According to the African Centers for Disease Control, the North African nation has reported over 120,600 COVID-19 infections since the pandemic broke out in the country. Tunisia's health ministry says it will hold an emergency meeting to follow up on the developments of the epidemiological situation around the world. Chinese health authorities are warning against emerging risks of COVID-19 as the weather gets colder. Feng Yilei finds out about the preventive measures China is rolling out as winter begins.
China has been seeing sporadic cluster outbreaks this month. They've been linked to cases in people returning from overseas. Some imported products and their packaging delivered via cold chain have also tested positive. This comes as China says it expects an uptick in logistics services during the winter season.
We're stepping up inspection and disinfection activities at the borders. We've emphasized personal protection for staff working on cold chain logistic chains, and we carry out regular tests for them. For most consumers, the likelihood of infection by purchasing imported cold chain products is pretty low.
China has also been working on building defenses against local transmissions. Over the past 5 months, it has carried out mass vaccinations for those working in transportation, healthcare, wet markets and other high-risk sectors. Chinese officials say the vaccines approved for emergency use have appeared to be relatively safe and can be used for a wider group of people.
We do not recommend getting a COVID-19 vaccine and an HPV vaccine at the same time. It is also not advisable if a person has an allergy to a certain vaccine ingredient. There are other situations where getting a vaccine would be inadvisable. For example, when someone has a fever or an acute disease. In general, we don't recommend vaccination for pregnant women.
The Chinese government says it will also conduct strict supervision over the storage and transportation of vaccines. They've also called for a decrease in public gatherings and advised against non-essential travel. Experts estimate that true herd immunity can only take place once roughly 70% of the population has been immunized. While calling for the general public to get jabs, officials also emphasize that wearing masks, hand washing and other personal preventive measures remain the most effective ways to keep COVID-19 infection away over the winter before immunity can be reached. Feng Yilei, CGTN, Beijing.
Nigeria may be heading towards a severe food scarcity as food reserves continue to decline. A long-running spate of conflict between farmers and herders and insurgency in the country's northeast have snowballed into full-blown insecurity. The Farmers Association say these, alongside issues of climate change and the disruptions caused by the coronavirus pandemic, have destabilized the food production chain across the nation. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports.
Emmanuel Wosu runs this fish farm in the outskirts of Nigeria's capital, Abuja. In the past, he and some of his workers would spend the night on the farm tending to the fish. That determined the output of their harvests. But now Wosu and his team work hurriedly to leave the farm before dark, as it has become more unsafe. Farmers around here have suffered series of attacks. This is affecting their productivity.
Since the insecurity in the country, all the storage systems has been demolished. That is the danger. This place those days, by this time, we have every pond stocked. And when you want to sell, you are sure you want to sell about 20 to 30 tons. But this day, walk around, you can only see about 2 or 3 tons, which because we are not sure of the security. So we take less risk so that to enable us to avert much of the loss. And that is why it is dangerous for the nation, and that is why it is dangerous for even the populace, and that's why the increasing hunger will continue.
Farmers Association has reported a worrying decline in food reserves. The country's food stock is less than 30,000 metric tons, grossly insufficient for the country's 200 million strong population. This is following a consistent surge in farmers' insecurity. The north, which is a seedling nestle for Nigeria, has become a hotspot for bandit attacks, insurgency, and clashes between farmer and herders. A dangerous trend for a nation making diversification efforts towards agriculture.
No need to look for employment. The empty lands is enough to give us what to eat. If people are being harnessed together, the clusters come together. There is acres of 100 acres of land that people can go and farm, government supporting them. There's acres area that people can go and fish, government supporting them. But when they are not sure of sleeping there, farmers sleep in the farm. That's why you call for. But when you can't sleep there, why are you there? There's many of them are killed.
According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, 9.8 million Nigerians are already facing severe food crisis. It projects the numbers could go up to 13.8 million without urgent intervention. This is as Nigerians grapple with severe economic hardship and unemployment. The United Nations warned that continued violence combined with climate change and COVID-19 disruptions will hamper food production. With the already depleted food reserve, many fear that food scarcity could worsen across Nigeria. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
So tonight we are reporting that more and more countries are banning British travellers over concerns over the new strain of the coronavirus. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is currently giving an address after an emergency meeting on the situation there. Let's listen in.
Work with our colleagues, with our friends around the world, as we have from the beginning, to develop new treatments and to develop new vaccines, as we have. And by the way, I can today announce that over 500,000 people, more than 500,000 people in the UK have now received their first dose. As we've seen throughout this pandemic, this virus, alas, can move all too swiftly from one nation to another, but it is steadily being defeated by an international response, and an international response that is bringing the hope of vaccines to the entire world, and in that the UK will continue to play its full part. I now hand over to Secretary of State for Transport, Grant.
Thank you very much, PM. It's just worth knowing what's going on in Kent. Before I came here, I checked on the latest numbers. There were...
All right, so that's a briefing from British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Just spoke before the Transport Minister took it over, giving an address after an emergency meeting there on the situation in the UK. And what we managed to listen to hear from him was him saying that over 500,000 people in the UK have so far received that vaccine. And he says that the pandemic is steadily being fought over by the collective effort of the world as the vaccine continues to spread globally. You're watching Africa Live. Coming up, Nigerian farmers worried about severe food scarcity as food reserves continue to decline. And COVID-19 spike throws a dark shadow over the festive season for many South Africans.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis,
Nigeria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Data from the UN Educational Statistics and Cultural Agency indicates that Nigeria has an estimated 41 million young adults who are illiterate, which is among the highest on the continent. Of that figure, women rank highest. While the Nigerian government is doing all it can to bring down the number, one young Nigerian is also going out of his way to give adult illiterates in his community in Lagos a second chance at education. Here's his story.
It's lesson time and the students are walking into the classroom just about in time for the lesson to begin. The students are mainly adult women who are part of the estimated 41 million illiterate adults in Nigeria. They are getting a second chance to education and a rare opportunity to transform their lives courtesy of this young teacher. Erezi Edore is considered a hero in his part of Lagos because of his free adult education initiative, which is empowering illiterate adults in his community, especially women, and helping them to get out of extreme poverty.
I grew up with a mom who had her education at a late age, who completed her education at a late age. So I got to see the transformation at a late age of an adult from nothing to become a graduate. And so she currently now an accountant working in the biggest universities in Nigeria, made me believe strongly that there is always a second chance in education. So in 2016, I got to find out that there are over 60 million illiterate youths and adults in Nigeria. And I said, wow, this is negatively huge. Somebody has to do something about it.
He's been running the Free Adult Literacy Project since 2016, using this public primary school. The adult classes hold weekdays every evening from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. and the project has been very well received in the community.
It is actually challenging. You know, getting adults to go back to school is psychological. So you have to first of all convince them and inspire them to believe in themselves, to make them understand that there is still hope for them to become who they want to be education-wise.
Through the project, many of the adults here are beginning to transform their lives. When Regina Kiwande enrolled for the program 2 years ago, all she wanted was to be able to read and write so she could handle her bank transactions all by herself. But today, she says she can even do much more.
When I came here before, I can't stay like this talking to people. But now I can speak boldly and stand before my elders and speak to them. But if it's before, I can't come out. When they are doing something, I'll be running backwards. But now I can come outside. That shows that I'm learning something here.
Edore has recorded quite a number of success stories and received recognition from government for his efforts. But he says self-funding the project has been a tough challenge. He's had to rely on volunteer teachers to keep the program going.
So a volunteer teacher is a working class individual who has benefited from education, who is reaping the benefits because they are working already. And they have the time in the evening after work hours to come down to the school to teach for free. We call them physical volunteer teachers, physically present volunteer teachers. That's one volunteer teacher. Then we have another set of volunteer teachers that we call funding volunteer teachers. And the funding volunteer teachers are beneficiaries of education. They work, but they don't have the time in the evening to come teach. But they support with little donations on a monthly basis. So we accumulate and we bring together the little donations the volunteer teachers bring, and we use the funds to hire a teacher on their behalf.
Since 2016, when Edore started his free adult literacy project, over 1,000 adult students have successfully completed the program and are able to read and write. Some are even planning to go up to the university level. For Edore, it's a modest achievement he plans to build on.
It's a journey to eradicate illiteracy totally from Nigeria. A crazy journey, I call it, but it's possible. So the projection is to be able to scale up having these free adult literacy classes in the 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria. And then we scale and expand to having a free center in each of the 36 states in Nigeria. At least by 2030, we would have been able to transform the lives of over 2 million illiterate youths and adults in Nigeria.
It's a long road ahead for Edore and his team, but he's as determined to continue with the program, hoping that gradually and with the efforts of others like him supporting the government, the country's illiteracy rate will continue to come down, and in the process, more people will be lifted off extreme poverty. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Some South Africa residents are concerned about the high COVID-19 infection rate in the country. Many people are now skeptical about overseas travel during the festive season and are opting to stay with family. Here's CGTN's Travis Andrews with more.
With over 912,000 COVID-19 infections, South Africa has kicked off the festive season in the midst of a second wave, which is being driven by a new variant. As a result, many people are avoiding crowded gatherings and international travel, including the Mulatto brothers, who are remaining in the mother city for their annual break. For them, the global pandemic and overseas travel poses too much risk.
I chose to stay in the country due to the uncertainties of COVID. I can recall well before few weeks before coronavirus strike, of which in some other parts of the world it started making some kind of a peak, and there were some other trips that were supposed to be considered.
By staying within the safety of a family circle and avoiding unnecessary social gatherings, they are able to stay safe and have an enjoyable coastal holiday in Cape Town. With a COVID-19 infection rate that is now topping over 10,000 new infections a day, many other South Africans are also doing the same until things cool down.
One will just observe in the context of development, and that will basically indicate whether is it safe to travel or not. At the current moment, I don't think I will do that up until one is basically is quite sure of the current circumstances.
And with little to no tourists around, many of Cape Town's famed hotspots such as Signal Hill and Lion's Head still offer them great uncongested space to unwind. With white sandy beaches and a majestic mountain range, it's easy to see why so many people have chosen the mother city over other top international destinations that still remain open. The beaches are where most are ending up, even though authorities continue to voice concern about the potential for super spreader events, especially in congested spots.
Coronavirus is a current thing, and people are filled with fear with regards to it, and supposedly so people are not going out, or I supposedly I'm not going out because of such illnesses that have occurred, particularly from hospitals, from even people that we know. Some of them are no more.
But now COVID-19 has already touched many South Africans on a personal level, including the mulattoes. And while this may be an unprecedented disruption to many people's holiday plans, there is a belief that the tide will begin turning and the country will once again end on a path to normality. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Let's cross over to Libya now, where residents of Tawaga town, some 200 kilometers east of the capital Tripoli, are slowly returning home after almost a decade of exile. Years ago, militia forces rampaged through the town, torching homes and destroying buildings that belonged to those they believed were supporters of former President Muammar Gaddafi. CGTN's Beryl Oro tells us more.
About 40,000 people in the entire town of Tawaga were forced to leave their homes after Libya's Arab Spring leader Muammar Gaddafi was toppled. Militia forces were keen to defeat Gaddafi and saw the town as an enemy. Many of its enemies were believed to be his supporters. But a 2018 reconciliation deal backed by the United Nations-recognized Government of National Accord was signed between the former bitter enemies. This saw people slowly begin to go back to the town.
We are now on the land of Tawaga, and this has been our desired goal for the last 7 years. The fact that we are able to be in Tawaga like this is in itself a goal that has been achieved.
But starting life all over again was not easy, as many of them have been living in makeshift camps and had to depend on the United Nations. With the support of family and friends, some of the residents have managed to start up businesses that have also benefited the community at large.
The beginning was hard, but thank God my relatives convinced me to get into hairdressing and open a barber shop because the community needed it.
Despite the reconciliation deal and promises by the Tripoli-based GNA stating that residents will receive compensation, many are still hesitant to return home. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
To Kenya now, where Chepkit Falls in Kenya's Nandi County has been a tourist attraction for decades. But the deaths of many there has led to questions about its safety for public use. Residents of nearby settlements hope that it will be closed permanently or adequate safety measures will be put in place to prevent future disasters. CGTN's Nick Mudimba has that report.
Chepkit Falls in Kenya's Nandi County derives its name from the Kalenjin word Chepkit, which means watch from a distance. It looks attractive even from far. Indeed, this is a marvel of Mother Nature, carved out of the magnificent walls of the Great Rift Valley. It's truly a sight to behold and a magnet for tourists from within Kenya and beyond. But there are concerns that it has also become a death trap.
This fall is known the world all over, but as you can see, there's no one here. Just a month ago, there was an accident here. A young girl came to visit, and as she was taking pictures, she slid and fell to her death. The friend tried to rescue her, but it was risky.
Bird lovers and even lovebirds have been swept away here. One has to exercise a lot of caution when at Chepkit Falls, as many have lost their footing in the past, turning picnics into panic, with several deaths reported.
The authorities' response is always prompt when they hear of an incident here. But even during these COVID-19 times, we see people taking a lot of risk. I don't know why.
The tragic incidents led to protests by residents who now want the authorities to either put in place proper safety measures or bar people from Chepkit Falls altogether.
We are requesting for tour guides and divers and security for emergency so that in case of anything, lives can be saved here. Once students are admitted, they should be briefed accordingly and should put prayers ahead. This place has killed so many students since 1960s.
Chepkit Falls is also an important source of fresh water for locals. They pipe the water to their homes for consumption. Now, the fall behind me is part of a very, very devastating situation in this village. But again, good for the eyes and very dangerous for the soul. The villagers are hoping that authorities will step up and safeguard this place to be a haven for only tourism rather than the negative publicity. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Uasin Gishu County, Kenya.
Abundant rains soaked West Africa in recent months, causing catastrophic floods in some areas that raised concerns about the rising human and economic costs of extreme weather. But this year's downpours also created the thickest vegetation in years, a vital respite for Senegal's farmers and its 3 million strong herding community after 6 years of drought. CGTN's Beryl Oro reports.
This time of the year, Senegal experiences extremely dry seasons. But this time round, what is normally parched earth is flourishing. A lifeline for many of the herders in the northern region.
Thank God, this year we have grass. You see, the grass is still fresh at this time of the year. Last year, during the same period, grass was already dry and there was not much of it. Now the grass is still green. The last rain was 2 months ago. This year is much better than last year.
But behind the blessing lurks a danger. With so much vegetation, herders fear bushfires could easily wipe out the pasture. And water for animals will also become difficult to come by as the dry season progresses.
This year we remain worried because the grass is tall and a lot of herders, especially the large-scale ones, are afraid of bushfires.
Herders are not used to unexpected benefits in the Sahel's semi-arid prairies. The land now has nutritious plants the herders feared was becoming scarce.
You see now, because of the high rainfall, the good grazing fodder plant has appeared, which is great for grazing animals.
Even the coronavirus pandemic became less of a concern to the urgent pastoralist needs.
With the rain, we even forgot that COVID exists. We even forgot that the disease exists in the region because here we are in the silvopastoral area. The herder always thinks of feeding his animals before himself. So if nature smiles on them, they forget all their problems.
The rains have also boosted other sectors. Grain output is expected to jump over 30% this year, prompting Senegal to reverse its economic outlook for 2020 from contraction to growth.
God is making human beings face an existential crisis. We don't know what tomorrow will bring. Our fears are real. We have not experienced such heavy rainfall in more than 30 years. The previous year's rainy seasons lasted for 2 months, which is too short for planting. But God decides.
Dramatic climate swings year to year are normal for the Sahel region, making it hard to assess the impact of climate change on current conditions. But if dry seasons keep getting hotter, as projected by climate models, some herders doubt the sustainability of their way of life, given their struggle to get through recent dry seasons. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Well, let's now cross over to Rama for the latest in business news.
Yes, indeed, Peninah. Plenty coming up in business, including content from Nigeria and Egypt.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. AfricaLive. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's start in Africa's largest oil producer. Nigerians have endured retail price hikes for fuel since June. Following a meeting with labor union leaders on the 7th of December, however, the government decided to reduce pump prices for a litre of petrol to just 41 US cents a litre, effective from the 14th of December. But, as CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam now reports, filling stations are yet to comply.
This fuel station and several others across the country are yet to adjust to a new pump price recently agreed upon. The federal government has been in talks with labor union. They recently announced a 3% decrease. Even that is yet to be implemented.
Since it's an issue of the government, we the independent petroleum marketers, normally we are law-abiding citizens, and we are waiting to see the white paper that will direct us to start selling at the government stipulated rate. But up to now, we didn't see anything. And to the places where we normally used to purchase this product, like in Lagos, Port Harcourt, and other places, they didn't change the price. The price that we are buying before, they still maintain the price. There is no any reduction. So if there is no any reduction, there is no way our marketers will carry product and sell at loss.
Nigeria is Africa's largest crude oil producer and 11th largest in the world. Its 4 refineries have a combined capacity of 445,000 barrels of crude oil daily. But in the past 20 years, the average capacity utilization has been hovering between 15 and 25%. And about 80% of the nation's petroleum products demand is met through imports.
What is affecting the price of petroleum in Nigeria currently as we stand is the exchange rate volatility. Our foreign exchange policy is porous. Nigeria operates up to 10 regimes of foreign exchange regime. And it's affecting marketers who have to import this product. You go to market today, you buy a product for 10 naira, and then you want to go to the same market the following day, and then it has increased. What increased it? Exchange rate volatility. exchange rate value. So we need to address this foreign exchange situation in Nigeria so as to ensure that there is a uniform price or uniform exchange rate in Nigeria, and that will go a long way to minimize the fluctuations that we are seeing.
Nigerians have experienced hikes in pump prices of petrol 4 times in the past 5 months. Government removed fuel subsidy in March 2020 to restructure the downstream sector and better cope with the COVID-19-induced crisis in the oil market.
If you observe, the sector is not fully deregularized because there is no competition between the marketers and NNPC. Because up to the present date, it's only NNPC can be able to import the product to the country. They should involve the whole marketers, that is independent petroleum marketers, major marketers, in a round table and give them the same opportunity the way they have been giving NNPC to import, so that they will create an enabling environment.
The devaluation in the local currency, coupled with a subsidy removal, spells harder times for Nigerians. And without intervention in the right direction, experts project that citizens may be forced to pay more for fuel in the coming days. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
On to the business of taxation. Now, it's not just Kenya that will be levying taxes on digital services in 2021. Think of, say, paying for your Netflix or Amazon subscriptions. But South Africa is also considering heading down the exact same path. Authorities over there aim to enforce a digital tax on platforms like Netflix. The government says it's important that South Africa takes part in international efforts to ensure that tech giants pay their fair share of tax in the countries in which they operate. CGTN's Julie Shai has that story from Johannesburg.
South Africa's economy reaped little reward from an unprecedented boom from international streaming services during the COVID-19 lockdown. Local offerings such as DSTV and Showmax abide by local tax laws, but global tech giants Netflix, Amazon Prime and others are governed by agreements overseen by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
The agreements with the OECD is actually meant to do is to create fairness, that not one country benefits more than the other. But if you look at the history, the basics haven't changed since World War I. The conventional law and agreements that you have to have a physical presence or permanent establishment. Now with the digital economy, it's no longer necessary. So you want to focus on where the value is created.
A 15% consumption tax is levied on subscriptions, but at least $40 billion is lost every year from digital revenue generation. South Africa is lobbying for that to change.
The OECD has placed a moratorium on the digital taxation or taxation of digital commerce since 1998. It was supposed to be 2 years, and it's been extended every year. South Africa has made proposals to the OECD this year to have it lifted so that we can introduce taxation of the digital economy.
South Africa is also considering using Netflix and DSTV to collect TV licenses. Government has struggled to recover fees as more people switch from televisions to other electronic devices.
The problem with that approach is that you already have a public that's overburdened and that regards the TV license fee as an unwarranted cost in their lives. Even though it's a small cost once a year, the fact that the SABC has been mismanaged for many years and is running at a massive loss is seen as a misuse of those license fees.
It could take years before either of these are implemented, but in the long run, it will cost South Africans more for services that have become essential to daily living. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Heads of state from the IGAD grouping, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development that combines about 7 East African countries, met on Sunday in Djibouti for an extraordinary summit devoted to dealing with 2 main issues, the situation in Ethiopia and recent tensions between Kenya and Somalia. At that summit, leaders urged Kenya and Somalia to embrace dialogue in order to resolve their long-running issues. Here's CGTN's Wilkis Tanyabwa with that report.
Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok of Sudan, who is the current chairperson of the IGAD Assembly, convened the meeting in Djibouti. Leaders who attended included President Ismail Omar Guelleh of Djibouti, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia, President Mohamed Abdullahi of Somalia, and Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta. It was African Union Commission Chair Musa Faki Mahamat who broached the Kenya-Somalia row, noting that it was a major source of concern for the AU. This after Somalia's foreign ministry sent a letter of complaint about Kenya to IGAD. On November 30th, Somalia expelled Kenya's ambassador and recalled its own envoy from Nairobi, accusing Kenya of interfering in the electoral process in Jubaland, one of its 5 semi-autonomous states. Analysts say the fallout could have far-reaching consequences.
Kenya is a troop-contributing country in the fight against Al-Shabaab. Kenya has been helping to stabilize Somalia, not just in the last 10 years, but since the government of Siad Barre collapsed, means that Somali should not just ignore the good things that Kenya has done.
AUC Chair Musa Faki Mahamat called for the two countries to open dialogue with the encouragement of IGAD. He cited their long history of good neighborliness and noted Kenya's contribution of troops to the African Union mission in Somalia. Kenya also hosts a large number of Somali refugees. Gedo, part of Somalia's Jubaland region, shares a border with Kenya. It is also one of the 2 places in Jubaland that are to take part in the upcoming parliamentary selection. But Jubaland President Ahmed Madobe insists he will not hold elections there until the Somali federal government forces that were deployed in this region leave.
Kenya should not respond to externalization of Somalia clan conflict because then it won't have a place to start and it might get into very slippery slope in trying to respond.
Kenyan Foreign Ministry spokesperson Cyrus Oguna has said that the government has set up a committee to seek a solution to the diplomatic row. Wilkis Anyabwa, CGTN.
All right, then across our borders now, China's benchmark lending rate that covers both corporate and household loans remained unchanged for the 8th month in a row. The 1-year prime rate remained at 3.85%. The 5-year prime rate, which essentially is used as a basis for setting mortgage lending rates, remained at 4.65%. This latest rate decision came after the People's Bank of China kept borrowing costs on medium-term lending facilities essentially unchanged this week. Still in China, as part of efforts to cut emissions, the country is committed to changing its energy generation mix. A white paper released on Monday shows that the world's 2nd largest economy will focus a lot more on low carbon and renewable energy sources over and above fossil fuels. It's striving to substitute low carbon sources like natural gas in place of high carbon sources like coal, while adding much more renewable energy sources to the national grid. Renewable energy sources delivered some 790 million kilowatts of electricity to the grid at the end of last year.
We have actively participated in the global energy governance and joined hands with countries around the world to deal with climate change. We called on the international community to make joint efforts to work towards green and low carbon development and support multilateral cooperation in energy. We also called on the rest of the international community to keep the international energy investment and trade smooth and work for more energy accessibility for less developed areas in a bid to advance the sustainable development of global energy and the global energy security. We hope the release of this white paper will help you gain a better understanding of China's efforts in the transformation towards green and low carbon development, as well as China's contribution to the global endeavor against climate change and towards sustainable development.
And I'll leave you there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour. In global business, we'll be looking at the prospects for South Africa's economy, Africa's largest industrialized economy in 2021. It's forecast to expand by just under 4% next year after contracting at nearly twice that rate in 2020. But will it actually hit that target? We'll find out and update you. For now, back to Peninah.
Thank you, Rama. And you're watching Africa Live. Still ahead. Ugandan artists using their works to express emotions around the COVID-19 pandemic.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Peninah, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
There is a healing power in art, at least according to Ugandan artists who are using their works to express emotions around the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. The artwork on display in the capital, Kampala, is meant to help people manage anxiety and brighten their spirits. Leon Senyange reports.
Primrose Rwanga felt overwhelmed with uncertainty when a national COVID-19 lockdown was announced in March. She decided to put her artistic mind to work.
Due to this challenging time of COVID, I thought about all the ways in which our freedoms have been restricted. Freedom of movement, freedom of being with friends and family, freedom to worship.
Like Primrose, some artists in the capital Kampala have been putting paint to canvas. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought out a huge sense of reflection.
In lockdown, a lot of our artists, a lot of our vocalists and things did their best work in that time. People came up with different inspirations for drawings. People came up with different inspirations for songs. People came up with different inspirations for their sculptures.
More than 20 explicit pieces of art are on display here. The artists hope their work can inspire people to cope after what has been a difficult year. Taking a different approach is Miti Chinawura. His light shades, he says, can add brightness to life.
Art also has its advantages. It can give you some therapy. Like for the lampshades, there's so much therapy in this because of the color and the warmth.
Uganda's rising COVID-19 cases are already a cause for concern. But for a moment, these art lovers can have a sense of relief as they wander through the displayed work.
I look at art and I get relieved. Maybe I get hope that 2021 is going to be better than 20.
Despite the low turn-up, organizers hope they can have a mass appeal when life gets back to normal. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Coming up in sports. South Africa reflects